It's fine.
Bergen is a pretty common.
Ruben and I
name
might
in
be
the area.
related distantly.
It's very exciting.
Distantly.
We're gonna have like Christmas parties.
Yeah, this is a perfect time to find out that our family's
What are
bigger,
you-
right?
When the pandemic is over. don't worry.
What are you going to bequeath to Ruben then in your will?
So you're assuming I'm gonna.
I mean,
die
Ruben's so
before
much
him.
older than
I'm
us.
saying
though.
if that happened and you're distantly related, what is he expecting to be owed?
I mean, he's such an avid musician.
No, that
I
blanket.
think
That blanket.
We have a
We give him. We've got a little toy drum from Cuba, I think, or something. We give him
leave
that.
to him because he's wanted to be on the worship team for a long. He's
For a really
he's
long
tried to
time.
audition for a lot.
And then our friends got us this blanket that is woven. It's beautiful. That it has,
Woven is the wrong word. It's like one you can get from London Drugs.
but it's like got
on
pictures
it.
of us.
Of
on it.
us. No, but you need to give more. No, like we
Like Facebook pictures, like just like things pulled off Facebook.
terrible.
Like
They
really
wrote
bad
us
ones.
a card at our wedding saying something great is coming for you, but it was like 15 friends from university. So I'm like, it's not going to be great. And they somehow got our landlords to let them into our house when we weren't there.
Yeah.
Left it on our bed.
Yeah.
Put all our stuff back on it. So like Ricky's guitars or whatever. I walk in the house when we were first married and I'm doing laundry and I turn and I scream because there's my face, Ricky's face on our bed. So we have that blanket and we've joked that we would like say someone stays at our house and without saying anything, we're like, here's your bedding. Can you imagine? You're at
I
someone's-
can't. So Ruben,
That's
what you can
That's what
expect.
you're gonna get.
hey everybody. Thanks for joining our conversation partway through.
Ooh.
Welcome to Grow through Living Waters Church. My name's Luke. I'm going to introduce these folks in a second, or they're going to introduce themselves. But if you're newer and you're joining us, welcome to our Grow session. We've been having Grow sessions all through the summer and into the fall, where we're aiming to tackle important questions as a community together, doing that through YouTube Live. And tonight we're talking about community, Christmas, and the pandemic, and things around that a little bit. So we're gonna meet these two in just a moment if you don't know them, but many of you do. But let me just give you a bit of a shape of the evening. It's if you're joining us live right now, yeah, we're about 7:30, and I think we're probably gonna have something like maybe an hour conversation. And in the midst of that, we're hoping for some back and forth if you're up for it. So if you're watching live, you can use the comment section to type in any questions, and periodically, as we're having the conversation, I'll check in on those. I've got some questions that we've talked a little bit about covering, but we'd love to hear your questions. So please type them in. And any question, you're open to any question,
Any question.
anything at all. Great.
Anything.
Algebra,
Not that.
nothing.
Well, no, I mean, they can ask anything. Will
Yeah, they
we
can
answer
Yeah,
it?
you won't
Sure.
answer it.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
So we're going to talk about the pandemic, what we're learning about community as we arrive in the season of lights and trees and babies and mangers and things like that. So thanks for joining us. And if you're watching this at a later date and it's not Christmas and it's the middle of the summer, we hope that this conversation can serve you as well. So let's begin by just getting to know these two first, and maybe you can talk a little bit about who you are, just so we can be acquainted for those that might not know you.
Do you want to do me? I do you.
Oh, this is Ricky. He's tall, handsome. No, okay. He's from Saskatchewan originally, and even though you wouldn't know it, he grew up doing a lot of very farm Saskatchewan things. He plays a lot of guitar, a lot of guitar, which is great.
Sometimes when she's talking,
Sometimes it's
which
annoying.
she doesn't love.
And I'm like, stop playing guitar and just listen. And he likes reading books a lot. I don't know.
This is Michelle. She's my wife.
Oh yeah,
work here at Living Waters.
We're married.
We're married.
That's what we can sit beside each other right now.
She's an
this time.
incredible vocalist, an avid baker,
Wow.
a lover of children because she nannies them, and she's just got like a way with kids that's amazing. And what else? She keeps me humble.
Is that a polite way of saying she makes fun of you?
Yeah.
I do make
Yeah.
fun of him.
It's
That's
good.
part of my
vocation.
I mean, I'm passionate about it
It's a
actually.
call, it's a calling.
It's a calling because he was raised very much like he is the best of the best of the best.
So, and you were like, yes, Lord, send me.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was kept a lot more humble growing up, like a lot more humble. Like we were told all the time, you're not the only pebble on the beach. Like that was.
Yeah, it sounds like we're gonna get into some of that later. So why don't we pause on that?
So you know.
So yeah, so
okay.
you've had a long relationship with Living Waters Church. You serve in
Mhm.
ministry here together as a couple in many respects,
Mhm.
and that's part of why we're here. And I think part of why we slated this conversation for this point towards the end of 2020, as we framed up our grow sessions, was a sense that maybe when we arrived at this conversation, we would say, yeah, I think there might be some things that we've learned about community that would be
Mm.
important to say now as we go into a
Mm.
new year, as we close out this year. And I know I've had conversations with both of you, like the three of us kind of around, but also one-on-one
Mhm.
of like, this is what I'm learning about community in the pandemic. And I found those insights to be really profound. So I'm hoping we can glean some of that wisdom tonight a little bit, and also just be raw about our experiences. And I love that about both of you, is you're honest people without making things about yourself. And you're willing to be honest for the benefit of the community. And I think that's a huge strength that you bring as leaders. So I'm thankful that you're willing to sit down and share tonight, and that you're coordinated, because
Yeah, we talked about it, prayed about it.
it's incredible. I feel a little left out. I mean, the
Sorry.
fact that we're talking about community of the pandemic and I'm the odd one out. Is
Yeah,
a little bit
it's
awkward.
actually, this is an art piece within.
It's okay.
Yeah.
The message is the
Super
medium.
meta.
Okay.
It's very.
And thank you to Ruben, who's running our back end again today. We so appreciate Ruben and his back end work. He's just a great guy. See? There you go there. He's got a great back end.
And I'm related to him.
Yeah, there you
That
go.
means something.
Okay, so here's my first question that's really going to
Wow.
ask us. Wide open question. Michelle, maybe I'll ask you this
Sure.
one. How has the pandemic changed your sense of community?
Well, I like people a lot. Big fan, big fan. And I will say in the last couple of years, I feel like, what is the word? I used to hang out with a lot of people all the time. Like, I feel like I had a lot of regular people in my life. I think that is part of being young. I think that's part of being at university. Like, I went to Trinity, so you can have a lot of like close friends, but like, it gets exhausting. And I feel like in the last couple of years, through various life circumstances and moving away and different things, you just start to really figure out who your core people are. And I feel that in this time, that has made it easier to keep in touch with people, because you're like, okay, no, these are my, like, I have to know what's going on, or I need them. But it's also challenging because these are the people that, before the pandemic, they were in our home like regularly, right? Like they were the people that would go, Christmas tree hunting with usually, or, like Friendsgiving or whatever you might do. And especially with the restrictions we're in right now, they can't even come into our home, right? We finally I went on a social distanced walk, wearing masks, even though we were outside with, two of my closest friends, and like, we couldn't hug, and that's such a weird feeling when, one of them, like, I lived with for a year. So it's such a weird feeling of like, okay, and we use Marco Polo. It's like a video app. And so we have like a group chat, and rather than messages, it's videos. And the amount of videos since the pandemic has like the three of us, right? Like that's how which it's better than texting for sure, but it's hard. Like,
So what's changed, I'm hearing you say, is a bit of how you connect. What's different? What feels different now than 6 months ago?
I think we're feeling like that we really we miss each other. Like I'm so thankful I am married. Like, I feel for like my friends that aren't married, that's really hard because their roommates aren't necessarily their best friends. Right. And I have such a gift in having, my best friend lives with me. So I'm allowed to see Ricky, right? I'm allowed to be with him, but there's this there's only so much that you can do through video, or even like when we are on our walk, it's not the same as just like let's just plonk in one of our homes and just be
Mhm.
together for a
Mhm.
couple hours, you know?
Mhm.
And I think there is that, you really appreciate the people that you love. Like, I think there's this like, whoa, I had no idea how special it was that I could see them kind of whenever I wanted. Like,
Mhm.
sure, we are at the mercy of our schedules, but other than that, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the how, and then also just I cannot wait for when, we can all be
Mhm.
closer again, like
Mhm.
physically. Like, I think there's I mean, we're physical humans. Like, I think there is a physical element. There's something when you can't be near a person
Mhm.
that you miss. Like, FaceTiming a person is great, but it's
Yeah.
not the same as being in the same room as them. Like,
Yeah.
it's just not. I think we all feel that right now, whether it's friendships, whether it's church, whether it's there's something about I'm here and I can feel I can feel
Mhm.
your
Yeah.
presence, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Isolation in prison
yeah.
is a reason why isolation is a horrible thing to experience
Yeah.
in prison.
We're just totally not made.
Yeah, it's
for
actually the
that.
highest punishment in our society,
Yeah.
essentially solitary confinement, right? Which
Yeah.
says something.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, we're not supposed to have
Mm.
that kind of like we're meant to, live in community, right?
Mhm.
Like, we really are.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that, and this is challenging us. And I think highlighting just how important it is.
Yeah. I like when you touched on about that we're physical beings, that we're embodied beings, right? And Ricky, we've had conversations before, right, about embodiment, and particularly as it connects to music. And you made the odd comment about what happens when people in a room together are talking or singing, or what syncs up in our bodies. And I wonder if you could just riff on that a little bit.
I mean, it's funny. It's not like with singing, it's amazing. I forget where I heard the study. It's just one of those anecdotal things that I heard, but that your hearts beat in time when you sing. Like your breathing obviously syncs, especially if you're singing in a choral situation, because your phrasing is the same, right? But your hearts will beat at the same time. You feel more empathy for each other, right? Like you're becoming like an organism almost, right? It's really strange. And I mean, you can do the experiment even, I think I did this once when I was younger in South Africa when we were talking about community and what it does to people. Like, sit beside someone on a bus and notice if your breathing doesn't sync up with them, right? Like there's something about being in proximity with someone that our bodies just like, they're tuned to each other, right? Like they just kind of resonate when we're actually in space together, right? Which is amazing. And then, when it comes to touch too, right? Like touch releases like just like cocktails of hormones and stuff like that bond us and empower us and other things like that and make us feel safe, reduce anxiety, right? Like it's amazing. I think a lot of us are learning for the first time. Some of us, like I would be much more on the independent end of the spectrum between the two of us. And one of the lessons I'm learning more and more and more and more is how much I can't neglect my body and embodiment and proximity and presence and all of these things, right? Like my part of me always thinks it'd be like, well, it'd be just great to be a head in a jar and just like think and experience things and stuff like that. But deeper we get into this thing, the more I'm coming to terms with just how real this stuff is, right?
Yeah. I can resonate with that on that spectrum. And the first few weeks, couple months, I was like, this is okay.
Yeah, dope.
And then you start to see the signs and the wear and the tear, the fatigue. And I think I just want to touch on that embodiment there because I think it's hard to talk about community and then to talk about ways forward in community without acknowledging our physical reality. And particularly if we're talking about faith, because there's so much about the Christian faith sometimes that we process it as some kind of disembodied spirituality versus an embodied spirituality. And throughout the fall, we've been talking about health. And this is part of those conversations. And every time we've talked about health in the pandemic, what has risen to the top is a lot of talk about physicality. And so I think this talk is important because we're kind of tasked with a bit of a difficult conversation so how do we talk about building community? And we can talk about online ways and things you can do by yourself, but how do we take into consideration what it means for someone in isolation to go, how do you maintain an embodied connection to other people and to God? And that's something maybe we can talk on a little bit later, but maybe Ricky, just a follow-up question for you. And just a reminder as you're listening, any question, Fire away. We would love to hear from you. And I will come to our comment box at any point and be willing to ask your question, because the free flowing conversation as much as we can. So Ricky, what have you found to be vital in heart and mind as you aim to stay connected in the pandemic? What stuff that you've put this in place because this has to happen if I'm going to stay connected to people?
Yeah. I think one of the things, this is something I feel like I learned a little bit before the pandemic, but it's become even more real in this season, is that community is actually like a spiritual discipline. Like it's, and in seasons like this, you feel it more than you normally would, right? Like and I think for much like we were talking about before, being on my end of the spectrum where quite often I could be very happy alone. There are a lot of moments when it's like, no, sometimes choosing the phone call is like choosing to go to the gym or choosing to eat a vegetable for me, right? Because it's particularly phone calls and FaceTime, I despise. Like I hate them with every fiber of my being. I don't know what it is about my personality, but as soon as I get on a phone, I feel awkward. I feel like I can't understand what's going on. Like
Long distance was so
it was
fun.
so bad.
Dating.
It's
Did
so.
you guys do long distance?
Just for
We
one
did
summer,
for a
but
summer, and it was bad.
Trying. We'd only been dating a month too. So 1 month of dating, 4 months of long distance.
Well, at least you had some of the early stuff to carry you through.
But
No, that's how bad he was on the phone. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It was pretty bad. I mean, he was also in Saskatchewan, and to his credit, there was nothing really going on.
yeah, so she'd be like, "What did you do today?" The same thing I do every day.
Watched a tumbleweed.
Yeah, totally right.
Whereas I was working at camp, so every day was like this and this and
Yeah.
this, and then I'd be like, "What about you?" And he's like, "I was like, this is so good."
Yeah, and I think along with that, so community as a discipline. One of the other things that's been coming up in a couple conversations I've had with people is this idea of, like, we often talk about God revealing himself to us, but often we don't realize that there is a burden on each of us to reveal ourselves as well. And I think when you're quiet and internal processor, or even some of us when we're stressed and overwhelmed, like when I'm stressed and overwhelmed, I withdraw. That's my defense mechanism. So when I come up against something, even if I felt like I've processed it, with the people who are close enough, going out of my way to talk it through as part of just being like, no, like I need to be in the discipline of community, and I need to make myself known and be present to other people fully, right? Not just present, because I think I can also, as a pastor, just slip into like, oh, cool, I'm just going to go into help you mode and like not show up myself, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I think that self-revelation piece is really important, because a lot of us are feeling a lot of feelings right now. And it can feel exhausting to always be bringing them up, especially if you're prone to like run away from your feelings as much as humanly possible.
Yeah.
But the only way we ever really feel okay with that stuff is if it's known, I think, at least in my experience. So, one of the most vital things is there's got to be someone in the life that, even if they, if you can't be physically in proximity with each other, there's got to be someone who can hold some of this stuff with you, right? No matter what stage or age or whatever you're in. I think it's vital. This stuff just gets gnarled if it stays inside of us.
Well, and not only that too, like that discipline of community piece and that discipline of revealing yourself. It reminds me of when we first started dating. And so my sister and I are super duper close and have been close our whole lives, 2 years apart. Until I was 18, I would start a story and she could finish it. Or you could say a word to her and I'd walk in, you'd say the same word, and we would have told you the exact same story 5 minutes apart, because we basically had the same life. And when we started dating, I remember she'd ask me something that I was going through. I'd be like, oh, I already processed it with Ricky. Like, I don't want to talk about it again. And that was actually really selfish of me, because it was like, well, I'm only going to talk to you about this if like I want to work through it. I already worked through it with like my new person. So but this idea of, letting someone in isn't just about, do I need,
Right.
it's also about, no, this is how I grow with you. This is how I journey with you. This is how I share this like just this gem
Yeah.
of a story with you or of a
Yeah.
piece of me.
Mm.
And I think it can be easy right now
Mm.
if your people aren't with you in it
Yeah.
and you're like a week later updating, you're like, it's already
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really need to let you in.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to actually lose. You're going to lose out.
The distance will grow. So there's a sense when I hear from both of you of I think that phrase community is a discipline is really important.
Mm.
Which if you've been in a community of faith or in a community that has been anything more than just people showing up and having a good time and then that's selfish
Yeah.
community, but a community that does build together, that has a mission together, that there's a discipline too. And then when you find that discipline is when you really find the riches.
Mm.
But to hear that now, community is a discipline that is going to be good for us to lean into is huge. And you said something that really you the way you talked about that relationship and in connecting with your sister, I heard you not say these words, but how it came across to me was community is service as much as like, this is not about just what I get out of it. And we're used to just turning up and going, we're used to just consuming maybe even community. And now it's like, well, no, I got to bring something. There's effort involved. There's sacrifice involved.
Well, and like giving that gift of vulnerability, right? Like if I choose to withhold that from someone who I say is one of my, like, to use Sarah Bessie talks about her somewheres, like her people, like the ones that are the safe places. If I choose to say, I'm not going to share that story with you because I've already processed it or I'm too tired, I'm not giving you that gift of that part of me. Right. And similarly, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it in marriage or, we experienced that. Ricky, again, because he's a more internal processor, sometimes we'll be like, well, he's not going to naturally maybe tell me that story. And I'm like, I want to know.
Yeah, the legendary
I want
moments.
that gift,
The legendary moments are when I lay down and like, I think I'm going to do this. And she's like, what? Like,
where did that
come from? Like, it's like, no, I've been thinking about it for about 3 weeks now. And like, it's like been rolling over in my head.
Whereas I'm letting him on like, and then I think this, and then I turn here. It's so special for him. But that's just a difference. But part of the discipline of marriage, of friendship, of community is I'm going to let you in on this, even if I don't need it right now. Like it's this.
No, it's an honoring of the relationship.
100%.
So connected a little bit to marriage and specifically to the pandemic, we have a question from Marcia. Hi, Marcia.
Hi, Marcia.
Marcia watching from Austin, Texas. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, what?
Marcia watching from. I want to say Walnut Grove, but it's not Walnut Grove because our brains don't work as well as they used to in a pandemic. But hi, Marcia. Glad you're watching. Marcia's question is, what has been hard for you as a couple during the pandemic? So maybe the conversation shifts now. Maybe now, welcome to couples counseling with Marcia Wilson.
Yeah, wow. I mean, we have remarked that we are very lucky we like each other. Like, I do think that this type of thing is like a refining, like it just brings stuff up. It's been interesting to talk to loads of people. Any living situation, I think, but marriage especially, it's just going to like
living situation, society at large. If it was there, it's coming up.
It's come up, and we're very, very fortunate that we like each other, and we're used to spending a lot of time together. Like our life is a very proximate community life, right? Like Ricky will work in the office sometimes and work at home sometimes. That happened before the pandemic, right? I was in and out. When we lived at Trinity, and I was a resident director. He was a student. So we were both we're used to inhabiting space. So I think we do have that. That helps. It wasn't like, oh, suddenly I see you all the time.
Good for you. But what's hard?
I think one of the hardest things, and you'll hear this from anybody in any relationship, whenever there's grief, everybody processes it so differently. So especially early in the pandemic, we are very different in the way that we process loss and grief and pain and anxiety and all of those types of things. And I think there was just a long season where we basically just lived past each other. Because I was just like, I'm just retreating into the shell. So just don't poke the bear, right? And I think kind of felt a little bit neglected by me probably at some moments because you wanted to talk it through or process or.
Well, and what was hard, I think, for us is I do feel like right before the pandemic hit, we were in a really good place.
Yeah, we were in a stride.
We were pumped to be back here. We were pumped about our living situation. We were proximate to a lot of friends. I was loving my work. I was nannying for this really awesome family. And the pandemic ended all of that. Like I couldn't nanny for this family anymore because they had a lot of high-risk people in their family. So it was just, and I suddenly went is all this personal / our progress
Mm.
gone? Because we came out before we came back here, a year and a half ago, we were in a really hard season.
Mm.
So I was like, do we lose all that? Like
The
is all that,
momentum of what you were.
Yeah, is all that
a lot
good?
was robbed. Or,
and I was like, I feel like I'm in a good place personally, like exercise, like all these things.
Yeah.
And that of course feeds into our marriage, right?
Yeah.
So I do feel like, not that you ever go backwards. I don't think that's a thing. I don't think we go backwards as humans. Like you're always growing, whether it's like we change, right? Like I don't think it's a linear thing. But we were in this living past, just kind of coping.
And I think I think we had learned this in an earlier stage in a relationship for a lot of different reasons. But like one of the things that's really, really hard in situations like this too, is because there is so many feelings, like you do have to learn to make a lot of space for each other.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was that hard for us in this past because of what we've gone through.
I was just going to say.
But like, if we hadn't gone through what we had gone through in the last few years, I think we would have been in a space where it would have been really, really difficult, because we would have felt like I would have felt like my job would be to save her from drowning, and I would have just become the super annoying Mr. Fix-It rather than like.
Yeah, I mean, we've had lots of opportunities to learn how to grieve together and separately in the last couple of years, and I do think this pandemic has put us all through grief, whether we admit it or not. And I've had to learn, for example, that Ricky does need space when he's grieving.
Right.
That I peppering him with questions and let me in
Yeah.
now. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I've learned to be okay in and of myself.
Yeah.
When we first were married, that would have torn me up. Like, I need to know what you're feeling. I need to know. And I've learned, and then he, on the same way, has learned if Michelle's going to be sad, she's going to be sad right now, and he can't fix that.
Yeah.
Nor is it my job to. Really, all you can do is be present to
you
it.
can show up, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that has helped us. But I feel like we're in a far better place now. I think that more we find things like we miss our friends, like community, having people.
You miss
in our
what the
home.
friendship does in the relationship because of how
100%.
you commune together in a way.
100%.
Well, that's a really great answer to Marcia's question. Thank you for answering, Marcia. And we've confirmed that Marcia is in Aldergrove.
Oh,
Thank
excellent.
you for that
Wonderful.
confirmation.
Thank you. But she works in New West, right?
Yeah, doesn't she work in New West? That's
It's got to be a commute.
What else can we divulge about Marcia's private
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Could you give us your SIN number?
on the internet? Yeah,
Yeah,
type your
so
SIN number in.
Maybe
next,
your
Marcia.
work schedule.
So here's the question. We waded into that word grief, which is great. For the purposes of the next question.
Great.
Like, I mean, what was it? There's a quote, and it's been coming to mind a lot recently, where there was stress moments the last while, like and now I feel like I'm so tired of the revs of stress that I almost feel like I've gone into a different mode now of a bit more zen. That doesn't always feel, but like something's kind of like, okay, well, I can't always be reacting and responding at that level. Like, and I kind of felt like, all right, the phrase came to mind, like, well, if you're not laughing, you're crying. Like that's something. So the grief is coming up, but connected to that a little bit, that I'd ask you, Michelle, and maybe not just for you specifically, but you can start from there. But thinking of all of us, like, what's Christmas going to be like? What should we expect of our experience of Christmas?
So I just recently started nannying for a new family, and a 3-year-old and 5-year-old. And the 5-year-old, 5-year-olds say hilarious things. Ruben knows he's got a 5-year-old, and she's doing her homework for kindergarten, which I'm like, homework? What? She has to draw like a picture of Christmas traditions. And she's sitting there at the dinner table last night. She's like, oh, nothing beats Christmas. What are you, an 80-year-old man? And she's like, and it's not about presents. No, it's about family, and it's a good thing I like my family. I'm like, what is going on? But it was so beautiful and so profound that this 5-year-old, who had spent all day telling me what she wanted for Christmas, okay? Like, this is not like a, kid that doesn't want presents, but just, nothing beats family. And I felt a little bit of pain in that moment, because I was like, oh, in this little girl's world, she gets to be with her whole family at Christmas, right? Like, because she's still a kid. She lives with her parents. She's got her brother. They live in her grandparents' house. So it's like, she's good. And I'm like, oh, I love my parents, I love my siblings, I love, and I think that there is grief in that. We don't know like whether we'll get to be with our extended family this Christmas. Like, I don't know. I don't know what Bonnie's going to say. Like, I was listening to some of like the, press conference or whatever from yesterday, and we'll find out soon, but I think we've got to probably change our expectations. I think the Americans experienced that with Thanksgiving just now, like Thanksgiving in the States, especially, has like a lot of pressure of like big family thing. And I think, expectations are huge in whether or not we're disappointed in something. Like it just is, right? Like if I'm expecting this Christmas to feel like other Christmases, I'm probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'm going to miss out on the joy of what it could be.
Yeah.
And I think really lowering expectations, I don't love the sound of that. I feel like that's it's going to be terrible. Like, no, but I think adjusting to be like, okay, there's going to be a simplicity or a difference, or, maybe I don't get to have the big old family gathering I'm used to, or, like there's a bunch of fun traditions we like to do around here. Like I love, it's more for me. I love going to Stanley Park Christmas train. Like, I just love that. We've been doing that since we were dating every Christmas.
Yeah.
We both have birthdays within the week of Christmas. So it's just like, we can't do that. Like all these things that give you the Christmas feels, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's hard. And so I think adjusting it of like, okay, what can we still do?
Yeah.
And that's probably not going to look very fancy, probably not going to be very exciting, but it can still be beautiful. Like for me, I'm baking like so much since this pandemic, but even this Christmas, I'm like, okay, I can bake more for people. Like that can be a way I can spread a little bit of joy.
Yeah.
But I do think that adjustment of expectations is going to be really key.
Yeah.
So
what are we, how, like maybe over to Ricky, like what 2 questions. Why is it important to name what we're grieving? And then following up from that, what are we gaining?
Right.
What could we be gaining with what feels like loss?
Yeah.
What could come through that actually makes the season potentially richer from your vantage point?
Yeah. Naming grief is, I think it does come back to that idea of like revelation or being revealed. You catch it. One of the things that was literally a shocking discovery for me when I was studying was, that the Psalms, more than a third of them, like the genre that's the most common in the Psalms is the lament, right? Yeah. Which is essentially just to name pain. Like it's just nonstop. Like, and they're written in a very general way to basically encourage you to take them and read them and apply them to yourself, right? There are Psalms for when you're sick. There are Psalms for when your friend has betrayed you. There are Psalms for all of these life situations, right? Where they'll straight up tell you, this is like that moment when David was doing this, so that you've even got somebody to connect it to, which seems to say to me that not only are we not giving something to our friends when we don't name our grief, not only are we kind of like caging something up within ourselves when we don't name our grief, but we're actually kind of keeping something from God too, right? That there is
that vulnerability piece that Michelle was talking about. We're not being honest.
Yeah, we're not being honest, right? Which I think literally the phrase, I did a paper on the Psalms, and brutal honesty was like the phrase that I used over and over again, that there's something that God just seems to be big enough to be able to take what we can throw at him when it comes to this kind of thing. And I can honestly say in my own spiritual journey, where I've learned to be present to those things and to name those things, there's been far more life and far more joy on the other side of it than there is kind of just denying it, right? Because there's something else about us, is that we're just like, we're made in a way. I was listening to somebody just a couple of days ago talk about emotions. It's like they don't disappear. Like the feelings don't leave. They will not, like they're there and they'll find their way out. Now they'll either find their way out constructively because you're paying attention to them and being honest with them and holding them, or destructively, right? You'll get mad, you'll be irritable, right? Like I'm slow to the emotion game and slow to knowing what I'm feeling, but generally like when there's a couple snappy moments or a couple things that happen, that's when it's like, okay, Ricky, take a step back. Something's going on. You need to name it. And it's almost always sadness, grief, loss, something like that, right?
The therapist friend of mine says, right, and I think he mentioned in our grow session is, emotions are like an upset stomach, or they're gonna come out whether you like it or not at some point, right?
Yeah,
So
100%.
like I mean that metaphor doesn't totally work in that like we can consider emotion as a negative thing, which
Yeah.
it isn't. It's amoral, right? It's not
Yeah.
negative or positive. But
Yeah.
So what as we recognize like the naming of grief and lowering, changing expectation
Yeah.
of going, okay, we got to be honest about that. We're not just going to skip Christmas.
Yeah.
We're going to be honest about it. We're going to go, okay, I got to adjust for that. I think people are preparing. Sometimes Christmas sneaks up on people and all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're hit with this wave of sadness because they go, I kind of not think about the fact that I don't have this person in my life because they passed away. And then all of a sudden Christmas hits and I kind of just don't like it. Some people
Yeah.
this year, I feel like everyone's gone through this shared experience of loss. So we might almost be preparing a little bit better for Christmas in a way. And so that leads me to that next question of, so if there's a lot been stripped away, what comes as potentially a gain in Christmas if a lot of the trappings have been taken away? Now, I do ask that reservedly because I'm all for someone who always does really believe that Christmas and abundance do need to go together.
Right.
I'm not one of these things that's like, shouldn't do anything. It's not about getting stuff. It's like, no, there's something about the abundance of God that comes through the manger and is on the cross that needs to be materialized in our life in a sense. Not translating to materialism, but it needs to be, right? Because those moments stay with you, right? Ruben and I were talking about this on a run the other day where we said, you know, what gifts do you remember? And he's like, I remember when we got a Nintendo and that stayed with me and that said abundance. And that tells you something about God through your experience of your parents.
Yeah, 100%.
So that caveat, which is a big one, sorry for that, that caveat, what in terms of that stripped away Christmas comes through potentially more richer than when the trappings aren't there.
Right. I'll give you a super pastor answer too, just because it's on my mind, because we were talking about this a little while ago. One of the interesting things about when Jesus talks about anxiety, and he gives a pretty good chunk to it in the Sermon on the Mount, is that he gives us advice on what to do. And a lot of people read it like it's a rhetorical thing, like, oh, consider the birds, look at the lilies. No, but like that's advice. Like he's saying, in a sense, to me, be present to what is, right?
Right.
And I think that sometimes, like, we talk about this in Christianity all the time. There are so many things that like pass us by, like all the time, right? And I think once we've been present to grief and once we've done that work, usually in my experience, what emerges on the other side is that ability to be present to what is, right?
Yeah.
And to be like, yeah, it's not all the things I thought it was, right? But isn't that like the story of Christmas to begin with, right? Like God not being all that we thought he was in the sense of this little baby in a manger, right? Like there's so much potential to try and, I think, capture so much of the beauty around us. And I think we're starting to learn that. Like, I think there's a simplification of life that a lot of people, especially early on, when they didn't know how long the pandemic would be, were like, I don't want to go back. You know what I mean?
Right. I go on walks outside now and all of a sudden I'm into nature.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I'm like, you're accidentally, because of restriction, stumbling upon stuff that's more healthy for you.
100%,
Totally.
right? And I think we'll, there are many beautiful things we'll miss out on. One of the biggest being spending time with family. But like, man, for some moms, putting that turkey in the oven that Christmas Eve night is like a huge pain in the butt, right?
Or the demands of having to go to 4 houses in 48 hours.
Yeah, some of my best friends live in Kamloops, both sets of their parents and grandparents, and like are in Kamloops, and they will literally spend Christmas Day.
Yeah. So there are young families that would go, this might be hard, but there's also maybe something of a gift in that, maybe.
And the being present, like I think, what you said about the stripping away does force us to be like right here.
Yeah.
There was this really beautiful moment yesterday with these kids. Is me and the 3-year-old were walking around town and they were decorating a tree right outside the hall.
Yeah.
And the guy getting the lights ready, he was attaching the light bulbs to the string, said to the little 3-year-old and said to me, would he like one of the light bulbs?
Wow.
And he was like, over the moon. Like this light bulb was his prized possession. And I thought, oh, should we get one for our sister? She wasn't back from school. I'm like, no, we'll go get her and then we'll come back and maybe he'll still be here. And so she sees her brother's light bulb. The first thing he says, look what I got from the Christmas tree. Yeah. And she's like, can I have one too? This 5-year-old. So we go back and they are like the rest until they went to sleep, their precious light bulb.
Yeah.
And their dad came home and tied a string on it and they added it to
Yeah.
their tree. And
Yeah.
like just that moment
Yeah.
that I wonder if we would have had that moment,
Yeah.
you know, if we were rushing around or whatever.
With all the things that we could possibly do
that was more exciting. We could have been doing something more exciting.
than just
And it was
this. Yeah.
so beautiful. Like it was,
Yeah.
I was like this, and I was so moved by this man's kindness. Like
Yeah.
he was so present with the kids, you
Yeah.
know, just like here, you know,
Yeah.
this little light bulb, and it just made their day.
Yeah.
One of the other words that you could use for abundance too is enough, right? Like abundance
Right.
says like overflowing, but enough also says abundance while saying, but like what is around you
Yeah.
is enough. And I think that the thing too that we get as an opportunity is that sense of reevaluation, because so often in our lives we think things are the way that they have to be, right? We can get ourselves in these ruts and these systems and these ways of living and these paths of living that are just like overwhelming us, but we're just like, well, it's just the way it is, right? So all of a sudden, you know, you have that Christmas at home, and even if it's us, if it's just the two of us sitting around a table having, you know,
Yeah.
a chicken, like we kind of get to sit there for a minute and reevaluate,
Yeah.
like, can this still be Christmas?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
right?
There's a thing that I've often talked about with young adults where people talk about the tyranny of the urgent.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm.
And I think that particularly maybe our generation and younger, what they're facing up until the pandemic, in a sense, was the tyranny of the possible.
Right.
Right?
Oh.
It's
Yeah,
like
that's good.
I'm
That's good.
overwhelmed by the fact
Yeah.
that it's like, and that makes you feel like, well, I can do anything, therefore I should do anything.
Yeah.
And in a sense here, it's like, well, here's something where you've been handed for a while, a little bit of not the tyranny of the possible.
Yeah.
And we talk about limitation actually helping creativity and deepen us, which I think is something to be said. So just to say, not to press on anybody who's going, listen, there's nothing to gain for me
Yeah,
in this, but to also say, let's be on the lookout
Yeah.
for what is simplified and what can go a bit deeper in that way.
Mm.
And I want to turn to a question about who do we need to keep in mind during this time? And we talked about people that lived alone versus people that have a family that they're living with, roommates that they may have a roommate, they may not. So the question I want to come back to in a moment is, if we can remind ourselves, because I can write it down, is what would we say or how would we imagine a conversation with someone who is with us now, who would say, I don't feel like there's anything redeeming about this. What do I do with God in that?
Mm.
But before we do that, great question from Kelsey, who I think is up the road.
Which Kelsey?
Eisenhuth.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah,
I used to live in that house.
there you go. So, worse we are telling everybody where everybody lives here.
Yeah.
Up the road.
Our internet etiquette
But
is
don't
not
you
very
think it's
good.
interesting that we?
long road. It's a long road.
You
we
know
have
you're from
this-
Fort
Isn't
Langley
it
when?
strange that we have this inclination, though?
Yeah.
To be like, where are you physically? Because
Yeah.
I need to know where you are physically.
I want to see it.
Yeah. So Kelsey's question is this: what about community in our neighborhood? I find myself having more energy and excitement talking to the clerk at the grocery store, waiting at the bank because I have capacity and excitement to see people. Like what about that? Like, have you guys found that those reserves are there?
Yeah,
Like,
I've noticed that because my people reserves aren't spent. Like I'm a very
Yeah.
extroverted person, but I
Yeah.
still do have a limited reserve.
yeah,
And there is this beauty of like, this is where I am,
yeah,
and I'm going to have the conversation in line at the
yeah.
grocery
I'm
store.
gonna connect with you because man, we both need it.
Well, and also I think there is this, we know what we're all going through. Like,
Yeah,
I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about, what we're living through. I guess there was some person who they're an expert on going through disasters.
like
So-
shared communal grief kind of.
Yeah, but this idea of we are living through, it's like a hurricane has happened.
Mhm.
We're trying to clean up as the hurricane's still happening.
Mm.
That's what it's like right now. That's why we're
Around the
exhausted.
world. Yeah.
But that's what's crazy is I don't know that in our lifetime we've had anything that so
No.
relates all of us.
Yeah.
Like there's this relatable moment. And I've experienced that with grief. When you lose someone, it brings you together with people you were barely friends with.
Yes.
Because you're like, we miss her.
Yeah.
Mm.
Goodness, do we miss? We had that with a friend where I became friends with people that were her friends
Yeah.
because we missed her. And
Yeah.
I feel that right now. We have this like, I'll talk to a mom and she's like, you know, I can't just have play dates with kids or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or it's exhausting doing, you know, my Zoom calls and then my kid is at school online, or like there's this, I have a window into your life that maybe I didn't have before.
Sure.
And I think that gives us a united
Yeah.
moment as well.
Yeah.
And maybe I get your life
Yeah.
a little more.
And
than
to
I
slow
could
down
have.
and be present, and to go, what can I learn about slowing down and being present, so that we can glean from that, not just now, but how might that translate into, pray God, the rest of our lives?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what can we learn now about that? And that would, I come back to that question for that person. What would, but you've got something that has come to mind that looks genius. So
Well, no,
I'm
I just,
sure it is.
the question I would ask is, what stops us from doing it in normal and when things are normal,
Right.
right? Like,
The being present.
yeah. I think that to me, that's the pressing question.
I think it is the busyness. It's the like I know from my experience
Yeah.
of, you know, I've been very open about my, you know, mental health journey. You know, I was diagnosed with depression, and basically my entire life was gone within a moment. And for 4 months I did almost nothing. And that stripping away, there's something that comes up. I don't wish this on anyone, but there is something that comes up where just like, you don't want that busyness anymore.
Yeah.
Like you just don't want it. Because it just gets icky, and you miss that little light bulb moment because you're not walking, you're driving a car, you know?
I've often wondered though, and I was literally having this thought today, because you know, you walk by people on the street and some people like look you in the eyes, and at least look you in the eyes, but there are people that look you in the eyes and smile, but give you like this like tight, like, you know? And it's like, to me, I was like, I feel like you're trying to protect yourself from me. You know, like I feel like, and a lot of times walking in the city, being from a small town where literally everybody you drive by, you wave at.
yes.
Like that's just what you do,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just like, goodness gracious, you'll only see 5 people on the road, wave at them,
Yeah.
right? Let them know that you acknowledge their
We're all
existence.
family here.
Whereas like, I think that there is this sense that when our world is bigger, we feel this need to like emotionally and psychically protect ourselves from people, which it's funny because now we're trying to physically protect ourselves from each other, but we're emotionally and psychologically often far more open to one another, right? And I think there is a big part of it is that we just were not made to live in the whole world at once.
Yeah.
Right. And there's something about being forced to stay home that even though we still have this godlike power in our phones where we can be witnessing everything in the world happening everywhere, we have to be proximate, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to be okay with the fact that like, walking down the street, I see somebody, I'll look them in the eyes because it's like, I'm not trying to get somewhere because there's nowhere to go. I'm not flying down the road to Vancouver, you know?
Well, you said something connected to that quite profound in the sermon last week, where you said the first problem that we're faced with, the first issue that God says is even before in the story that sin enters the narrative is loneliness, is isolation.
Yeah.
So we got to take that seriously. And so I guess with that narrative in mind a little bit, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what do we say to someone who is genuinely feeling and going, I feel like there's almost nothing. I was talking with someone the other day, actually, who would be in a really desperate spot, high demand of work, in public health, pressures that we in this room can't imagine, and going like, what do you say to someone who goes, I feel like God's not involved. I'm barely hanging on by a thread. What do we say about the Christmas season to speak some hope into life like that? Because they may not be able to see it themselves at this point. What do we need to say of the gospel to each other if we're like, I'm right down here. Some people are here, some people are way up here. I'm bottom of the barrel. What do we have to do when we're in a conversation with somebody like that? Maybe that's a better way to ask it. How do we be with someone who's in that kind of a spot? Because I think there's a lot of people in that spot.
I mean, I think we have to make room for that. Like I think there, or not, I know God has so much room for us to say, I'm mad at you right now, or I don't see the good in this. Like God has all the room for that. He's okay. Like, and again, that vulnerability, that revealing of ourselves, be honest with God about it. Like, don't be scared to say that. He's not going to run away from you.
Right.
And don't be scared to say that to your friends. Be like, hey, I'm happy you're happy.
Right.
I don't feel that joy right now.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was in the depths of depression, there was almost, my friends would like not want to tell me if something was great in their
Right.
lives.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that doesn't feed my,
No.
I'm not like,
doesn't-
really? Now I'm going to be more depressed. Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm like, I'm genuinely glad there's something happy in your life.
Yeah. Your happiness doesn't take anything from me.
No, and there's not this scarcity mentality of that. And so I think
Yeah.
we need to have that, hold that space
Yeah.
in our communities and in our friendships, in our lives of like, you know, I'm going to celebrate you, or also, hey, I'm celebrating, but I'm going to also grieve with you
Yeah.
and leave room for your grief. And
Yeah.
if you can't feel hope right now, I'm going to hope for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's
And I
just
know
what
when I was
gonna
in
say.
the depths
Yeah.
of my depression,
Yeah.
hope was just like this far off concept. The people around me hoped for me.
How does that work? Because I think there's a difference when
Mm.
someone, and I've had this experience with someone who's lost a child when I was
Mm.
pastoring,
Whoa.
as I'm pastoring. And they said to me, they looked at my faith at the
Mm.
time and said, I don't have any faith right now in God, but Luke does.
Yeah.
So I'm going to trust that I
Yeah.
can hold faith through him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went, I don't know. I couldn't, before that moment, I didn't understand the difference between hoping for one another
Hmm.
and someone trivializing your situation, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Like, what's
Yeah.
the difference between you going, listen, I'm going to hope for you, and don't worry, it's going to be okay? Because I think those are two
There's
different
a
different
big
things.
difference. The difference is saying, hey, Michelle, it is totally okay
Yeah.
that you're mad at God right now.
Yeah,
And I don't actually
I'm not
know.
going to correct that. I'm
And
not
I
going to say you're
also
doing
don't
something
know what the result of this
Yeah.
year will be. Or
Yeah.
I don't know that you're going to feel better in March. Or I don't know. But I do know that God still loves you,
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
you feel it or not. And I'm going to hope for you. And I'm not going to push you out of this. I'm not going to force you to
Yeah.
list the 5 things you're thankful for. Like
Yeah.
those are the moments,
Yeah.
like when we're like,
Well, why don't you
"Fuck
do? Why don't you do this to like
Yeah.
pull your bootstraps up? Yeah.
And I did have people that would do that. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, well, if you pray more, or well, if you do this,
Yeah.
or if you
You had
do
somebody
this.
once ask you why you didn't trust God enough when you were struggling with anxiety.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember that.
they said, oh, I
It's
don't.
it's the difference between, I think this is like we've talked about this a lot, but this is like, there's a famous illustration by Brene Brown that really works well, where it's like, you know, being like in grief is like being in a really dark pit,
Mm.
and having sympathy for someone is like open up the trap door and be like, really sucks down there, hey? And then like holding hope for someone is coming down and being like, yeah, this is really dark, right?
And being with them.
Being
Yeah.
with them, right?
You'll be encouraged by this. That's
Hmm.
exactly what Marcia just referenced.
No.
That's amazing.
So Marcia, I don't know if you've got some kind of like weird
Tuned to the same way.
Maybe we're reading
tune-
the same things.
tune into that,
Alder
but
Grove is ahead in
but-
time.
Alder Grove.
But-
Specifically Alder
Just
Grove.
saw into the future.
and that's something that I heard a while back that in Jewish traditions, when there's grief,
Sit Shiva? is
sitting
it called?
Shiva,
Yeah.
it's like you don't do anything, you just come and be with the person and just make sure they know they're not alone in grief.
A podcast I was listening to today, they were both referencing grief and saying, have you had those friends? They were saying how we all say like the only way to love people in grief is like make them meals, et cetera, et cetera. And she's
Yeah.
like, some people are the ones that like come over, you know, your really good girlfriends come over and they crawl into bed with you and just lie
Yeah.
there, say nothing,
Yeah.
do nothing,
Just
but they're
here.
there.
You're not
And
alone.
those were my friends. Do you know what I mean?
Well-
Like that just said, I'm just going to show up.
Well, and this might sound morbid, but it's just the truth. What do we do when someone's on suicide watch?
Mhm.
We have to put someone physically with
Yeah.
them. Say, oh, you're not alone, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold out for you so that there's no harm done.
When I
to
was
you.
a resident director, I had to do that with students. And it
Yeah.
wasn't me saying anything, it was me doing it. It was just me, I'm going to sit in your room
Yeah.
as you do your homework. Or
I'm gonna
as
protect you physically because
Yeah.
you can't protect
And I
yourself.
think
physically.
that's the difference is
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't need to make this better for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what our issue is, the reason why when you tell me I'm in despair and I'm like, it's going to be better,
Yeah.
trusting God is because I'm scared.
It's actually about you.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm making it about me now. I'm scared of your grief.
Well, it's like you said, like my happiness isn't gonna take anything away from you. Your grief isn't gonna take anything away from
Yeah.
me.
Like me being in
Yeah.
depression is not going to send you into
Yeah.
depression.
So why are we so insecure for
It's-
someone turning up and going, hey, my life is
Well, as a culture, we don't really hold space. Like we don't really have any like rituals of grief
Yeah.
as a culture. Like
Yeah.
that's not like I love that other cultures have that. I'm like, I wish
Yeah.
we had that.
Yeah.
Like we don't really have like a grieving process or
certainly in community. I think we do it in isolation in different ways that isn't always appropriate or
Mhm.
helpful. You would say healthy maybe, but in community that doesn't get let out as much, I think.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think a lot of people are cheering Marsha on for being on point on the chat here.
I think one thing that like I think sometimes one of the things that I've thought about for a really long time, and I don't know why it comes to me in this particular way, but like it's like we sometimes have confused the like power of positive thinking for hope. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right. Like
that's
I think
big.
I think like Paul even says in Romans 8, right? Like, you know, whoever hopes for something hopes in something that is unseen. Like if
Yeah.
it was seen, you wouldn't be hoping for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
And so if you're waiting for something in hope, you're eagerly expecting.
Yeah.
And often for me, I think as I've learned this more and learned how like white knuckled and desperate hope really is, a lot of times it's just hoping for like 1% better. You know what I mean? Like it might be like I can't get myself to thinking that like the new heaven is coming tomorrow, but I can think that like, you know, maybe I won't feel quite so alone, right? And part of even what you learn in properly dealing with your feelings is to stop identifying yourself with them, right? Stop saying I am sad. No, it's like I'm feeling
I'm
sadness,
feeling sad. Yeah.
right? Because there is a hope that I'm more than just this thing I'm feeling right now. I'm more than just this despair, right? There's, you know, there's a greater narrative to my life than this particular moment,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And that's hope.
And that's doing that communally as well. It's when
Yeah.
we're around one another consistently, we're like, oh, my experience of life right now is incredibly dark, but somebody over here, actually, there's a lot of light going on in their life right now,
Yeah.
and like that makes me think that maybe there's a possibility
Yeah.
of something
What
going forward. And that's one of the points that I think in prayer that I heard someone say a while back that's always stayed with me is there's kind of 3 ways to pray with each other, right? It's you know, hold on with me, you know, hold on to me, right, in prayer, and hold on for me, right? And I think those are 3 things of like, hold on to God with me as we do this, hold on to God for me, right? And I think there's something to that reality of there's room for all 3 of those sorts of experiences that
Well, and I think too, like in this, I think learning to be okay if like this is not your favorite Christmas ever or your favorite year ever, like your life is still okay. And I do think in our, you know, Instagram worthy world, we do have this crazy pressure on ourselves that maybe is real or not real, that every moment needs to be like, this was my best trip, or this was my best year, I grew the most, right? And that might not be this year. And that's okay. Like,
and we're used to that, like in other situations. Like one of the things I love about like small groups in churches is like icebreaker for the first 15 minutes, right? And often when we really look back on the conversation that you can go, that was really the best stuff, because it often is the most honest stuff. Like when you play happy and crappy, right?
Yeah.
Because what are we doing when we play happy and crappy? And for those that don't know what happy and crappy is, it's go around. So Michelle, this week, what was happy? What was crappy? You know, and you go, well, what are we doing in that moment? We're going, that I'm honest about what sucks. And I'm also honest about what was great, because they can operate together, and the one doesn't have to override the other.
And it's exactly the same.
So could we do that this Christmas?
Well, and
this is crappy, but what's
well, and joy and grief are such close neighbors. Like you talk to anyone who has gone through. That is not my quote. I don't know whose it is, but I will.
No, tweet it. Joy and grief are such close neighbors.
They are like in the depths of my depression. Like there was joy I got to experience, not in it, but like there are people you meet that you're like, I know you've lost something because there's a joy they have.
Harold Sawatsky is one of those people.
There's someone I worked with at Trinity who lost a wife, lost a child. He had a joy that I'm like, that has been hard won. Like that is not fake. That is not pat. That is not trite.
It's
One of my favorite observations ever made, and I can't remember who made it, is that you'll notice in Psalm 23, the path of the good shepherd goes through the valley of the shadow of death. He hasn't stopped leading you when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, right? That's actually that's part of the course. So it plays in with that.
Yeah. And I think letting others around you maybe hope for you, sing for you, you know, trust for you, and you know, letting the joy and the grief be there.
when you think about, I'm just making a weird connection, and you can correct me because you're the theological authority around here.
Wow.
But when you think about for the joy set before him, Christ endured the cross. You ask that question, is Jesus rejoicing over us? So incredibly profound, because Christ has endured the most sorrow and grief that any human being ever has. Like, how, if they are that close, how much of that is, how much was lost, but how much did he gain in terms of what he won for creation?
And I do think there is a closeness to Jesus that we gain in going through that grief.
Yeah.
Which, again, I don't wish it on anyone. Like, I don't.
But you don't have to, because we're all going to suffer and we're all going to grieve.
But I think there is a closeness with Jesus that comes in that, of like that suffering and that, oh goodness, I desperately need you. Like, I just need you. And again, I'm mad at you. I don't get it. But like, I also like, I need you. Like, none of this is on my own anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So 8:30, I got maybe, I think it's interesting that I was so interested to see what kind of conversation we would have, right? Like, we kind of kept it wide ranging for a reason. But the question I think maybe we can close with, and this is, we don't have to close right now. This is your time. Why am I looking at the computer? This is your time to write in a question, because we'll keep going. But the last question I have would be, what signs of life have we seen that encourage you? I love that story about the Christmas baubles, right? What signs of life are you seeing that are encouraging you, that we would say there's something in that?
I think it is like what Kelsey said about I have time to chat with neighbors, or I've noticed that in my building. Like, there's this, oh yeah, come in the elevator. We both have masks on. Like this, maybe I didn't have time before. Didn't really care. Didn't need it.
I got other people I got to get to. I don't need to be with you.
Like the other day, I walked beside a neighbor who was walking in the same direction. You know, we were in the elevator. And we chatted for 15 minutes as we walked in the same direction. I don't think that would have happened pre-March, pre-this. And so there's a real beauty that, you know, hopefully when we can hang out in each other's apartments, we're going to. Or I've had people say, oh, I can't wait till we can have supper together. Or I can't, like, this appreciation. We've said, once this is all over, we're renting a hall and having a massive
dance party. Yeah.
Everyone is invited.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to pool their money. It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be crazy.
It's going to be awesome. But I think there's those things that you just come to appreciate, like, so deeply, you know, that you, again, like, you're not going to appreciate it so deeply without this.
Yeah, I think there's a joy and simplicity that a lot of people are learning and really learning for the first time. And it's like amazing. Like you said, it's like there are people you talk to now and they're like, apparently, like, walking through the woods is a thing. You know what I mean? Right? It's like, what's that Ron Burgundy one? Like, it's like, yeah, we're gonna do jogging. It's with a silent J. Apparently, you just run, right? But like, there's
something more than Amazon, the mall, going to Cactus Club.
Yeah,
there's more to life than that. Like,
Wait,
did you guys know that
Yeah.
you can do these healthy things and your life feels better?
And it's like, it actually works. Like, I think that's the thing. A lot of people are, and myself, I feel like I'm coming to a new realization of just like, oh, like, if I like pray and work out and like cook a good meal at night, like, life is really good.
It's a good day.
Like, I didn't need all of that stuff that I was really used to. I thought I did.
Yeah.
Right? Like, much like we were talking about with Christmas, I thought I needed the shiny thing, right? You know, a lot more people are buying pianos, like dogs, like just things where it's just piano dogs in pianos, right?
Dogs who play piano.
But I think that realizing,
So many jokes.
learning to differentiate between wants and needs, and learning which things are actually vital and good for us has been like amazing. It's been amazing for me. And I thought, like, I'll admit I'm a little braggart. Like, I thought I was pretty far along on that journey, and I wasn't. Like, I really wasn't. I feel like in the last 3 weeks, I've gone to a new level of like, oh, like, that's what I actually need, right? And all that other stuff, it's like, it's nice. But yeah.
What other signs of life are you seeing that are that are encouraging you,
Mhm.
you know?
I think, like, it sounds weird, but a lot of the grief and the longing is a really beautiful thing. Because, like, I mean, even like talking to other friends, it's just like, man, I would just love to see a live concert. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think sometimes we learn so much about what we find beautiful and meaningful when it's not there, right? When it's taken, right? Like, I mean, I've got to go to Saskatchewan a couple times through this season, and what it meant to me to be home in this season was so much more than it had meant in other times, because it's like the only traveling I've done, right? And some of the circumstances for it were very, very sad, but I don't know. I think there's just something about, yeah, we start to realize and sink into the sweetness of things when we do have to wait for them, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit of an Advent thing, right? Like, I am excited for those first few weeks, right? Where if we don't gorge ourselves, where all of a sudden, you have the house party and you're sitting there, with the food on the table, looking around at other faces, and just like I feel emotional thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like I honestly feel emotional thinking about being able to have people around my table again.
Yeah.
Right. That's how much it means to me, how
Yeah.
much it matters. It's like to walk into the doors of this church and to be able to sing, like, oh,
Or to just like take someone's hand, like those little moments, those little
yeah,
like
to touch
physical
someone on the shoulder,
interactions.
like these things. I think, I was talking about differentiating between wants and needs. These things are needs, and we are being deprived of them, right? And so when we are able to have them again, like how sweet that will be,
Yeah.
right?
Like one of my dear friends is a nurse and has roommates, but she's not living with her family, or she's not married, and she's a nurse, so she is physically in people's proximity, safely, but physically. But she says, Michelle, I don't remember the last time I was hugged.
Yeah.
She's like, I miss it so much.
Yeah.
And she's a person that knows she's a physical being, like she's very embodied.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my, how heartbreaking is that? But also this, like, I know that I need this. Like I need this physical, like we'll be watching a TV show or a movie. I'm like, oh, that looks nice. Like they're all in the same room. They're not wearing masks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's weird how our brains are watching going, you can't,
oh no, I've totally had
Totally.
that where I'm like, what, not distanced.
Yeah.
Or but I think there is a beauty in that, and a beauty in just the acknowledgement of the other, that I really hope and pray that when this is all over, we don't forget about.
I think it will shape us significantly. I mean, part of the reason I wore this sweater is it was knit by my grandmother,
Oh, that's beautiful.
who's in England, and my grandpa passed away last year, so they're in severe lockdown, and she's there by herself. Thank God there's family around that. There's one, my aunt could go and visit her, and they have that connection. But when we ask her about the situation, I mean, she's kind of like of that generation, like she soldiers on. She lived through the war, a teenager during through the war, and they said, does this feel like, we asked, cousins asked, does this feel like the war? And she said, in some ways, this is much, much worse. Because in the war, you would still kind of go on. Some people go away, there'd be air raids and things like that. But in this sense, we weren't kept away from each other. We could still come together. And so I think we have to process that of going, when we look back at World War II and we think of the people that lived through something like that, or other cultures that may have gone through similar kind of challenges around the world, we kind of go, that's the worst. And we're like, we're living through something on that scale, if not to some degree, in some ways, like bigger in some regards of how it affects people. And we won't know for many, many, many years the research, the data that's going to come out of it, about what we learn about each other as human beings and how it's going to affect things. But I do think that when we point to the signs of life now and lean into those, that can help shape us going forward. And there has to be people who say, I see this as something that's really important. Let's not let go of it. And let's ensure that when we do slowly, pray God, emerge out of this, it will not be a switchback. And I feel the need to say that to people all of the time. They go, when it's normal, when we're back in, it's like this time next year, I do not know what we'll look like. That sounds sad to say, but I don't know. But can we make sure that we have have a slow progression still towards health by pointing
Yeah.
out the signs of life. And the signs of
Well,
death.
I think that's a connection that pointing out is so important. Like we'll often talk about this. I think this is, I hope it's relatable that everyone struggles with this, their relationship with working out. Like I know I love
Yeah.
running, but when it's rainy and dark, I'm like, and Ricky will always remind me when I come back from a run and feel amazing.
Never regret a workout.
Yeah.
But he's like, remember what it feels like.
Yeah.
Remember how good, like how Michelle and how clear your head is, right? And I think same with, remember how whole and how human I feel
Yeah.
when I have that time to talk to that man who gives a light bulb to this 3-year-old he doesn't know.
Yeah.
Like how human and how beautiful that is.
Yeah.
Like remember that,
Yeah.
right? Because we can forget that,
Yeah.
as you said, right?
I heard a couple of closing thoughts because I want to ask you guys what you would say would be the thing that you're walking away with that's emerged from the conversation the most. So a couple of things I heard was community is a discipline. So like work towards it. And it's important. It's not a discipline like, oh, you've got to do more. Aren't you tired? It's like working out.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a good kind of discipline.
Yeah.
And then I heard, but in the middle of that, let's not bash each other over the heads of what we should be doing.
Yeah.
Let's make room for one another and what our
Yeah.
experiences are. Those would be the two things that I would
Yeah.
walk with. But
Yeah.
what for you, Michelle, would you go, this is the thing that really stood out to me in our conversation that we discovered as we talked.
I mean, I think I'm a verbal processor. So that I'm like, this is so helpful for me. Thank you. I should thank you for that.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you,
Seriously.
everybody who's on
Yeah.
the chat.
But like that, I think there are some things we can say now we're learning in this,
Mhm.
but a lot of times we don't know what we've learned in something till we're out of it.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm being reminded of that right now, that it's okay if I don't know the full extent of the value of,
Mhm.
like, I can acknowledge I'm gaining things in this
Mm.
season. I can right now. I think a couple of months ago, I was feeling more the loss of it.
Mm.
Right now I feel a mix, as we all do. And I can see things I gained, but I think, 6 months from now, I might be able to say, whoa, that there's that beauty that I've gained. And I know for me, there are things I've set up in my life in the last month or so,
Mm.
Disciplines, those types of things that are good for me, but feel hard, that I don't know I would have done if this hadn't have happened.
Mm.
I think this conversation is reminding me of that, of like, whoa, okay, like, these are shaping Michelle, shaping my year, creating space. Like I know lately my mind just feels so much more like clear.
Yeah.
Like it's not cluttered.
Yeah.
It's not like,
Yeah.
it's just like, but there's a clearness, there's a clarity, there's a centered groundedness
Yeah.
that I didn't have before. And this has been a reminder of
Yeah.
that beauty.
Can I give you a really hard challenge?
Okay.
It would be hard for anybody.
Okay.
If there was a word or a phrase, she's already balking at it. If there was a word or a phrase that you would carry away from tonight, from your own experience of the conversation, what would that word or phrase be?
It can be a phrase.
Mhm.
Thank you. That's nice of you. Well, it's not a new phrase or anything, but I think hope will not disappoint. I
You say that again?
hope will not disappoint.
Okay.
I won a giveaway through Jessica Wilson, and she made a banner, and I could choose what I wanted on it, and that's what I chose. And it's in our one washroom, so that when you're sitting there, you see it.
What, when you're constipated? Hope will not disappoint?
Wow, it got real.
I said it would get real.
It got real.
We have more time to contemplate on it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah. I just thank God for those moments. Well, not as more. Wow. But like this reminder of this hope that even if right now I can't feel it, or a friend around me, or, but that hope will not disappoint.
Hope will not disappoint.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take that phrase and put that over here. Hope will not disappoint.
Okay.
Is there another word, one word that otherwise would come out from this conversation for you?
He doesn't like my answer.
No, I like your
I like
answer.
your answer. He
I
likes
just
your
think
answer.
there's something else as well, and I'm interested in now hearing.
He wants, I feel like I'm in a counseling session. And
You're
they're
not in
like,
a
what
counseling
else is there,
session.
Michelle?
He's saying he likes the things that you said, and he feels like there might be something more in you.
I'm just curious.
I don't feel like I'm in a test.
Don't worry. I'll look over here.
Be present?
Yeah.
Question mark? No.
That's good.
Period. be present.
Yeah.
That, and I think that is.
Why did you say question mark?
No, because I said it because I felt I
'Cause she
do
felt
this thing where
interrogated
I
by
felt
us.
interrogated.
She didn't-
No,
But
no,
the
no,
period is like,
the period is real.
it's like
Be present, because, and I think this is the pandemic married with being a nanny right now.
Hmm.
Children, you have to be present. You know this because, like, if Gloria needs to eat now, she needs to eat now, right? Like
Sarah deals with all that.
good.
I just hunt, she gathers. That's,
Wow.
I'm that kind of,
Yeah,
for those that are, that's not actually
not
how I
true.
roll.
It's a joke. Ha ha ha. That's why
Yeah.
it's funny. But children teach you to be right because they want that little light bulb.
Mm,
Like they want that, and that's a beautiful moment.
Mm.
And as an adult,
mm,
like, are you going to like? You're not. It'd be a little weird if I'm like, can I have a light bulb
Yeah.
from this tree? But children are like this.
yeah,
This right here.
where I am.
Mm.
And I think the being with kids right now and the pandemic, it's just being
Right.
present and just like the beauty and richness
Yeah.
in that. Like I come home from the end of the day, like yesterday I nannied for 12 hours and
Yeah.
or 10, I don't know, 13 hours, a lot of hours. But I was like, I had all these stories and I could remember my whole day because I was there.
Mm.
Like my mind wasn't elsewhere. It was like, this is, you know?
So hope will not disappoint. Be present,
Mhm.
like a child is present.
Yeah.
This is a blending of a few different scriptures just to reflect on that.
Mm.
But when I think about Christmas, I thought about the story of Jesus putting a little child among them.
Mm.
But then when I think of Christmas, I ask, and God put a little child among them.
Mm.
Yeah.
What does Christmas mean about presence? So
Oh.
thank you for those reflections. They're
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thank you for, prodding. And
I'm just racking up coaching hours. That's the whole point. Ricky, if you were to take a phrase or a word tonight that
you
struck
can't
you.
let his be, you have to let him do two. You have to make him do two, too.
Okay.
The
Okay, middle
the thing
child.
that was really like the whole revelation thing really was coming up in the moment, like the idea of like you got to reveal yourself, and especially what you mentioned about the story with Anthea and Michelle, like the phrase that comes to mind
Anthea
is
is
like,
my sister.
yeah,
That's
like not showing yourself can be selfish. You know what I mean? That felt interesting, right? Taking it more as like not just because you like again, you may have done your work and maybe processed, you may feel fine about it, but there's something there's a responsibility to each other, especially in the really close relationships, to show up, right?
Yeah.
To show yourself, right? And I think that's again, if loneliness is the ultimate evil, the one that was there even before the fall, right? To hold these things alone is to just like embrace that as the way of being, So
Yeah.
I think that stuck with me. That'll stick for a while. Yeah.
If you were to sum that up or try to in a phrase, what would that phrase be?
Yeah. I mean, just show yourself, right? Just, you gotta be, right? And again, that's very much preaching to somebody who needs to do it. Cause I would rather just carry it on my own, be independent, all that kind of stuff, right? But show yourself, show what's going on, right? Like don't have a space where that's possible, right?
Yeah.
Even if you have to make it. And I think that's the hard thing. I think a lot of people wait for the invitation, right? And it's just like, no, like stuff is so broken that there's going to be very few people who will invite you to do this. Like it is something that sometimes you need to learn to carve out, right?
Yeah.
And it sucks. And I wish the world wasn't that way, right?
Yeah.
But
by you showing yourself, other people will then feel, oh, I can now.
and it will
Right.
hurt and you'll fall and it'll suck and like, it will not work out many times, but eventually,
Well, it's hard to hear you say that with a cross behind you and not think of vulnerability as service.
Yeah.
What is the cross if Christ crucified, naked with no bathroom breaks,
Yeah.
as our friend Rick would say?
Yeah.
What is that if not service? So vulnerability is service to one
Yeah.
another in community in this season is an interesting way of processing our responsibility in community, even in this time of working towards one another. Maybe how we build community right now is just being open and raw and being ourselves with each other and giving each other room.
Yeah.
Are there any other word, like a word that would stand out to you that came today at all?
There's not, I mean, like presence was a huge theme, right? And I think it is, you know, I don't know if I can find a word for the individual thing of just, I mean, presence is probably the best word, right? But, you know, we did talk a lot about how sitting in the place of non-judgment, allowing people to feel what they're feeling, allowing ourselves to feel what, like, you know, space might be a good thing, right? Space, right? Like there's the roominess, right? A roominess is needed to deal with these things. You can't be rigid. You can't be strict. It needs to be kind of, these things got to breathe, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to the two of you for serving and being vulnerable today. Thank you to Ruben for serving and being vulnerable. Thank you to everybody who turned up and participated today. I think we're still trying to figure out how to make this as interactive as possible. So for those of you who are willing to type in and react and all that, like, just really appreciate it. And I think maybe next time, as we do this, what are you walking away with? Maybe next time we'll build in for you to type
That'd be
in
great.
what would be a
Yeah.
phrase that you would walk away with. But I'd maybe encourage that as we sign off, is to maybe open a notebook or your phone, wherever you store stuff, and say, what am I carrying away from that? And how can I factor that into my week through prayer, through discussion with others? What would be a word and a phrase that you'd walk away with? And the question I'd ask with you is, what do you want to do with that? It's quite simply that. But yeah, this has been Grow. This is the end of Grow 2020.
Whoa.
So thanks
What
for
an
being in the
honor.
room for
What an
the
honor. Yeah, what an honor. Wow.
for the party. And we don't know what the January will look like, but we invite you to continue to find ways into community. We know that online is no substitute, but it's what we have, and it's a way forward. So we do our things with the people that we can be with physically, but we also we do things like this to spur one another on. So as a church, we're going to keep trying to do stuff as safely as we can, and to make sure there's stuff weekly coming out for our community as resources that aren't just written by somebody in Texas, but they're coming up.
Texas has really come up a lot.
But I don't know why, but there's stuff that's being contributed from people in Aldergrove and Fort Langley. We want that, right?
And maybe next time tell us your
yeah.
specific addresses when you
Yeah.
when you ask questions.
That's my takeaway. Don't tell Luke where you live.
Fair enough. So some things that are coming through: grace in the roominess, vulnerability is service and service to one another, acknowledging grief and extending grace, and people, namely Marcia, says thank you to you guys.
Love you,
and
Marcia.
but I think I will also, even though we're winding down and Ruben's like, just wrap it up. For the record, thank you to Ruben for being in the back end for the last months of this and taking no glory whatsoever.
Come on.
And we are just very grateful for you and all that you do, because you're a person that turns up and just makes room for everybody to be who they are and in being yourself. And you're one of the most authentic people we know. We love you very much.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's not even his birthday today.
You know what? We're all just here because we're like, we just really want to be together.
Honestly,
Yeah.
this is great.
I was like, oh, I got to go
I
to work
have
tonight. It's like, oh, well, maybe we get a chance to have a conversation.
Friends.
Life,
Beautiful.
friend.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Anyway, and our numbers are slowly diminishing. We were like 12, now we're 6. So we love you. Thank you again. Peace be with you.
And also,
Thank you, Michelle.
you're welcome.